So you already have music.
That sounds like rock and roll.
That's right. There it is. What's going on, guys? This is the Connect Podcast. I'm sitting here with Matt Manning. I am Jared, and we have special guest with us, James Johnson. What is going on, James? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here, guys.
So James is our resident Pearl Jam fan.
Amen.
And so as we're jumping into stuff today, we want to just talk about the music industry and what music we should be listening to or should not be listening to and how that affects us. And so that's really where we're going with today. And I wanted to kick us off. I know that we all have a little bit of a different eclectic style when it comes to music. And so, Matt, I want to kick it over to you. I'm really curious. When you were growing up, middle school, high school, what was your jam?
Yeah, so...
Name that jam.
Name the jam. Yeah, so I had, I think, a pretty eclectic, music style. In fact, I was, made fun of in middle school and high school. And then in college, a little bit probably as well. But listened to everything from, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, to the first CD I ever bought was MC Scat Cat. Do you guys remember MC Scat Cat?
I don't remember
so
MC
Scat Cat was this cartoon cat character that sang with Paula Abdul.
Nice.
Yes, and so that was actually the first CD I ever bought when I bought that.
Do you remember the first tape you ever had?
Oh man, no. I don't remember tapes that much.
Yeah.
I think my mom had a lot of tapes, but I don't remember having any tapes.
I got a free tape. We had a guy that was my parents did we always had a room with somebody living there. And this guy was working at the family bookstore.
Yeah.
And he brought home a sample tape of it was New Thing with DC Talk and also Jesus Freak.
Yeah.
That was my first tape that I remember.
Nice.
But I got the sample.
Yeah, I just want CDs in the early 90s, when I was around 10 or 11 years old. And then I became a Christian when I was in middle school. And then the whole Christian world kind of thing opened up. So I remember when DC Talk was at Red Rocks and went and watched them at Red Rocks and some of the other bands during that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. I saw DC Talk too.
Were you at Red Rocks?
I wasn't at Red Rocks.
Were we there together?
Was it? They were touring with Audio Adrenaline.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
And all I really remember is they did flips on stage.
Yeah, I remember that too. They did that.
That's the thing that sticks out to me. What about you, James?
So as a kid, my older brother, for my birthday every year, would buy me the album that he wanted.
As an us gift.
Yes. And I didn't realize it, but so I got the Eagles album, and I remember when he bought me AC/DC Back in Black, and that's pretty.
Was this on CD or was this on vinyl?
It was on vinyl.
Yeah,
you grew up in a pretty cool time.
Yeah, yeah. And then so he really controlled a lot of my feeding of music, and our family wasn't a Christian family, so everything was what was hot in the culture.
Yeah.
And then, but in high school was really when I was introduced to U2, and it was the music and it was the sound and it was Bono, but it had a lot to do with it was music with a purpose. His social justice edge really spoke volumes to me. So it was kind of the beyond just the cool factor. Yeah. It was that it had a purpose.
Where did you grow up?
In high school I was in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hoppin'
So
Scottsdale.
I think this is why James is so cool, is that he grew up and his first, was vinyl Eagles.
Yeah.
And mine was a CD of MC Scat Cat. That probably speaks to
I think that's
the coolness factor that we have here on the panel today.
Yeah, I grew up with with a lot of Christian influence too. My first concert was actually Carmen.
I'm sorry.
Me too.
At least I wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. Riot, but when I was in middle school, I started getting influenced by outside, and so I started listening to Eminem and Korn and Limp Bizkit.
There you go.
You went way off the deep end.
Oh man. I don't think I was pulling that stuff up. I actually, a friend of mine, I texted him a lyric the other day, the first lyric and the second line of it is really bad. And he wrote back to me, don't text lines you can't finish or something like that, as a joke. And so, yeah, there was a lot of that stuff that we made like skate videos and used like corn music to make our dumb little skate videos. I wish I knew where that video was. I feel like that would be gold. But
Probably would be worth some money.
that's
like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
to
Or-
you.
to me, and maybe my mom.
That's right.
But no, that's good. I know that music is something that's super powerful and super impactful for everyone. You know, I've only met one person in my life that said, "I hate music. I never listen to it, and I never want to listen to it." And they're really weird and odd because that's not a normal thing, right?
isn't.
Everybody has music they like, and they like it for a particular reason. And it's really interesting. They've done lots of studies and research and the way that music affects us and affects our memory and our brain. I mean, just like smell, right? You can smell something and it'll take you to a memory.
Yeah.
And I can hear different songs and it immediately triggers
Yeah.
something in my brain. And they've done studies about how lyrics, if you're listening to lyrics, if there's a musical melody to it, you don't actually have to process that lyric to put it into your long-term memory. That it just somehow makes its way back. Every other kind of speech, like we get to decide, are we going to file that away, or are we going to work at filing that away, or is it just going to go in one ear and out the other? And so, and also just music with kids, right? Like they've done stuff with classical music and baby Einsteins and all of these things where they're using music that, for whatever reason, it helps that developmental process. Did you guys, you guys have your kids, did you ever use baby Einsteins or any of that stuff with your kids?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And then as they got older, definitely kind of guarding the music we listen to as a family. So our kids,
Because your kids are teenagers and
now, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but early on, like it was worship music and Johnny Cash and U2, like because it's Johnny Cash and
and it's you too.
yeah. So, but I mean,
Those are your exceptions to the rule.
yeah, but we didn't sit down and cuddle up with Black Sabbath as a family,
Right. Come on, gather around. We're gonna
Come
listen
here,
to
kids.
yeah. Listen to this new Korn album.
Yeah, for us, I don't know that we used music a lot in our house. The Wiggles were a big deal,
Uh-huh.
And so maybe we were turning off music more than turning it
on.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, fruit salad, yummy. Like that's 13 years ago, and I still remember
Yeah.
those songs.
Yeah.
so,
Matt has a fun house.
That's totally fun.
yeah.
What about now though? I mean, your oldest, he's 13?
Yeah.
So, do you have conversations about music? I know, I remember being a teenager and saying, what I listen to doesn't affect me. And, you're on your high horse saying how it doesn't. But the reality is that it does.
Yeah.
And so, have you had any of those conversations with any of your kids?
Yeah, a little bit to that. I mean, Theo's definitely more into music now as a 13-year-old than the other two are specifically. And, one of his big things is he loves the Hamilton soundtrack, like I think most everybody at this point
Yeah.
loves that.
When you said Hamilton, the first thing that went in my head was the Hanson soundtrack. And I'm like, wow,
yeah.
Theo and the Hansons,
Hanson,
the Hanson brothers.
No.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
That's it.
yes.
That's so
Still there.
Hamilton. Got it. Hamilton.
Yeah, Hamilton. And, listen to some, I'm just spacing out the rapper, spoken word artist that's a believer.
NF?
NF,
NF.
yes.
Yeah.
NF. And so I've introduced him to NF, which we've been able to have some conversations about that because NF, he's a believer. But a lot of the things that he speaks to a little bit more of the real space of life. And so having conversations about that and what does that look like. And so that's right now where his musical preference is. And I try to pay attention to what he's listening to because I assume that's what probably most of culture is listening to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard too. I mean, because you want to know what is driving culture, right? James and I were just in the hallway yesterday talking about like Billie Eilish.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been creeped out, when she first came out with stuff, and it was something that someone's like, man, because I was doing youth ministry at that time, and they're like, you got to know who she is and kind of know what the message is that she's putting out there, and I think that you have kind of a different take on it than I do. But I mean, I hear it and I'm just like, oh, I'm ready to turn it off because there's just something that feels dark to me about what she's doing. And what were you saying? Like even just like her techniques, her recording techniques.
Oh yeah, I mean, as a musician, I mean, hearing how they record her voice like so close to the mic and it's compressed in a way that it sounds like she's whispering literally right into your ear, and it's a musical technique, but it creates that creepy effect.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I think like as a parent, like I see it through the lens of the opportunity. Like I remember years ago, my daughter Em and I were out on a daddy-daughter date getting frappuccinos, and we're small talking, and I asked her, it's like, so who are you listening to? And she at the time it was Imagine Dragons, and it was like, Imagine Dragons, cool. What's your favorite song? And she said, oh, this song called Demons. And as a dad and as a pastor, I was like, tell me more,
Yeah.
you know, right? And so we left Starbucks and we went and sat in the car and listened to it. And as we're listening to it, it's all about the internal struggles that this guy's having with, I want to do this, but I'm living this way. And what he's calling demons as a pastor, I'm like, that's the turmoil of humanity. That's the foundation for the gospel.
that's just the striking word that grabs your attention.
Totally, yeah. So as a dad, I had the opportunity to have this great conversation about original sin and the spiritual condition of all people. And this singer sang a song setting the platform for that. So it gave context for a
non-Christian
fantastic
band.
conversation. Yeah,
Yeah.
where if I would have said demons, that sounds like a bad song, I'm banning them from our household, I wouldn't have had that conversation with her.
Yeah.
And then years later, we went and saw them, and it was a
Yeah.
rad show.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things too. It's like anything else in the world, right? Is you have to help teach your kids how to filter and how to handle things as opposed to just separating it from them. And then I feel like they graduate and then they just go dive into whatever anyway because they don't know how to process things in a healthy way.
And that's been like as a dad and as a pastor, like one of my drivers is a worldview. Like I talk a lot about a biblical worldview because how you see things is how you're going to experience it. So like for a child, I controlled that, right? It was like, these are the movies we watch. These are the things I'm exposing you to. But as my kids have gotten older and as I walk with people who have read some of the Bible and they understand the basics of the story, now we can listen to music or we can watch a movie or we can talk about a social situation through a lens that we can discern what the message is and if it's a positive one, if it's a negative one, so you can make those decisions. So instead of just like black and white, no, we're going to cut off all that stuff and we're only going to listen to these things and watch rated G movies. It's like there's most of my favorite movies are rated R movies, right? And they have beautiful stories of redemption.
But I think the counter of that too is recognizing that brains are developing and knowing the appropriate time to allow, like, is your child brain developed enough and mature enough to handle figuring out how to process through some of that stuff? Because I think that we can, at least in our house, sometimes we can be guilty of exposing maybe a little bit sooner than we should, and then we have the repercussions of that. Where you're like, oh man, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so trying to be wise about how much do you let them see and when. But I mean,
Totally.
your kids are older than mine, and your
Yeah.
kids are older than, we're kind of like in three different phases, really. And so how does that play out in your household, Matt? I mean, are you kind of having those, like Theo's 13, so are you having those conversations with him as well?
Yeah, similar to that, in terms of music or movie, any kinds of entertainment, what is the message that's being spoken here and what is it? And, sometimes it's just pure entertainment, right? Like that's all it is and we enjoy it for what it is. But other times, having the deeper conversation. So, my son is right now really into war type stuff. And he wants to be in the military when he grows up and,
Theo
all that's-
does?
Yeah. All that's
Interesting.
exciting to him. And so I had him read the book Unbroken. And the
Yeah.
deal was, is once you finish Unbroken, we'll watch the movie together. And so it's opened up the opportunity for, you know, some conversation about World War II and what was going on there and what was actually behind the, you know, the drive of the whole war was really came down to image of God. And so in movies, particularly in that space, like I said, with some of the NF stuff, looking at that and going, what's really going on here? What's he singing about? What's he saying? So yeah, those are happening.
Yeah, that's good. And you know, it's interesting too. I mean, when you think about this, should I listen to, like, is Christian music the only music I should listen to? And some people have that stance, right? Like, you shouldn't listen to secular music at all. It's all garbage. It's all junk. That has crept in even to what we do in the church, where you know, some music will be described as good and other music is bad. Like, even the introduction of like a guitar, you know, like that was divisive for lots of churches and things like that. Or the drum kit or any of these things. And I don't think that one music style is good or bad over another one, but certainly the hearts and the lyrics behind what you're singing about are. I was having a conversation with somebody that struggled with alcoholism, you know, and they would, you know, sit and listen and drink and listen to Pearl Jam, and basically he said, I don't know how else to describe it. I was worshiping the band, you know, and that
This wasn't a conversation with me, by the way.
this was not James. No,
Okay.
yeah, it was somebody not sitting on my right. May or may not be in the but it's kind of like, for some people though, if I struggle with alcoholism, right, I can't touch alcohol, and I recognize that about myself, and maybe that it is maybe listening to a certain music style or music, maybe it takes you to a dark place that you need to recognize that in yourself. And it's not like an umbrella for everybody, like everybody get rid of it, you know, but maybe it's unhealthy for you spiritually.
Totally. And I think a lot of that has to do with your maturity and with where you are spiritually and emotionally. I mean, like in high school for me, I love Pink Floyd. And I'm
drinking and worshiping the band.
Oh, wait, no,
that wasn't you. That wasn't you. That wasn't you.
And
I'm just kidding.
I bought and threw away Pink Floyd The Wall probably 6 times because I would get it.
He appreciated that, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And
you gave them so much money.
They loved it. And but I'd listen to it and I would just like camp out there. And my girlfriend at the time, or my family would notice, like I'd just start talking like this, and I would go to this weird, and it's just like, dude, are you back on the wall? And it was like, you need to listen to something else, because as a teenager, it affected me. Like it brought my emotions and my depression and all those things to the surface. Like I was able to identify with the music in a way that wasn't redemptive.
Yeah.
And at the time, I wouldn't have used the word redemptive. I wasn't a Christian. It was like, you know, but now I can look back.
But it was affecting your soul in that way.
Totally. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, interesting. Matt, throughout the years, have you noticed music having any kind of different positive or negative influence in your life?
Yeah, I think so. You know, in terms of what we're talking about here, I think that when it comes to, like, this is one of my huge, like, soapboxes, is the sacred secular divide that we have. Like, when we talk about secular music, what are we talking about? Like the top 15, 20 songs? You know, because at the basic level, and James, don't like keep your knife in your pocket, but at the basic level, music is math, right? It's rhythms, it's beats, it's sounds, it's silence, right? And that's neither.
Isn't 6/8 the mark of the beast or something?
And that's neither. It's neither secular or sacred in that space. And so where I oftentimes go to is like Genesis chapter 1 that says, you know, God created all things and he made them good. And then Paul says, you know, whatever is good, whatever's worth of virtue, like put your mind to that. And so when it comes to what we listen to in music, like very much I've tried to like separate myself from that discussion of what is sacred and what is secular, and really asking maybe not like the moral question, but the aesthetic question. What is beautiful? What is honoring in that space? And I think that when we go down that road, for me, and I think of, you know, different albums or songs or whatever, certainly they do affect us differently, you know. I like to listen to more upbeat, faster, even more aggressive songs when I'm working out. You know, when I'm driving around by myself, I typically listen to the songs that are
That
more
slow beats
chill.
per minute makes it really hard to really be pumping.
It's muscles under tension,
Yeah.
yeah. And so in that space, and I've seen the way that music actually affects people. I mean, we talked a little bit about the science behind that, but one of the things that Pastor Brad, who's a worship leader here, studied was, as part of Mercy Music, is the kind of healing effects that music has on the body. And he used to speak to me about it, and I'd be like, woo doo 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 doo,
Yeah.
like in this space. And then I was with my grandmother after she had a pretty severe accident. She was in the hospital struggling, and she would have these moments of anxiety where she didn't know who she was, she didn't know where she was at, and she would just kind of freak out, and her heart rate would go like through the roof. And in those moments, I actually had Brad's great album that's all his guitar, and it has all of these beautiful hymns of him playing the guitar. And the nurse came in, and my grandmother's heart rate was through the roof, and they were going to pump her full of meds again. And I said, hey, can I just play some music for her and see? And the nurse said, sure. And I turned on that music of the hymns that she grew up listening to being played on the guitar, songs like Oh Sacred Head. And we watched, the nurse and I, over just a few minutes, like we're talking 90 seconds to 2 minutes, like her heart rate come back down. Like she knew the familiar, and the familiar calmed her soul. And you could see it physically happening in her body in the hospital. And it was like, from that point on, the 2-3 days that I was with her, anytime the anxiety would shoot up, I would just play Brad's album again. So I got back and I was like, bro, Spotify is going to pay you a lot of money, and part of that you need to send to me.
That's right. That's funny.
Yeah, but so I've seen it, you know, that side of it.
Yeah.
And so, how it affects us is great.
And I think too, in that the sacred secular conversation, is the reality that the Christian industry kind of puts on a facade. There's actually a lot of stuff going behind the surface that actually looks really secular. Like the Christian industry it's an industry.
It's a business.
It's a business, and they're running a business just like everyone else. They're just, you know, using a different front, and they're going after, and that's a big umbrella. Okay, that don't say every Christian artist out there has a separate agenda, but I know that there are a lot of Christian bands that I listened to in high school that fell off the grid for 10 years, and now they're coming back out with albums on secular labels. One of them, they even have a podcast called Bad Christian, and they're basically like, man, we tried to do the Christian thing, and we lost our faith because of the industry, and they've turned away from God because of it. And so I think for us, we just need to recognize that that's a reality. The flip of that is that truth is truth no matter what, right? Like if something is true, it is always true. And I believe that derives from God. But just because I'm a secular person doesn't mean that I can't know what a truth is. And so a secular artist can actually write music that is about a truth and is true. And I think that God can use whatever He wants to use to speak to us and to meet with us and to draw us unto Himself, right?
And that's kind of, I mean, my attraction to Pearl Jam early on, and like my love for Eddie Vedder and for their music really came from, I mean, I initially loved the power of their music, and like,
your name's Eddie. Do you just have to be a good musician? Is that the rule?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
And by the way, my kids grew up calling him Uncle Ed, so I don't know if they know yet that we're not related. But
hey, let the dream live on, man. Don't
exactly. How come Uncle Ed never comes to for Christmas? But a part of it started out with like loving the sound of the guitars and the power and the chord progressions. But as I listened more over the years, what I realized is a lot of the anger and a lot of like the issues that their songs are written about. And again, as an adult, I did this, not as a kid or a teenager, but as an adult, I was like, you know what? I don't like those things either. And even 90% of the things that they're angry about, God's angry about. I mean, so much of it is the injustice in our world. Now, I differ from Eddie on the solution,
right?
But I can identify with the problem. So I listen to the songs and his cry out for justice and for order, and it's common ground for me. Does it make sense? So it's not that I worship worship them or I'm flying their flag.
It's relatable.
It's relatable. And as a parent and as a pastor and as a human being with a heartbeat, it's like that's the cry of our culture.
Yeah.
And if I am so part of my plug for rock and roll is if I don't listen to that voice, how effective am I really going to be in helping those people who are struggling in 2021 with what's going on? Like if Billie Eilish and if you know all the bands at Lollapalooza or Coachella, like if they're crying out about injustice, and if I am not aware of that conversation, how effective can I communicate the gospel, which is timeless and it doesn't change? How well can I communicate that into that culture if I'm not listening to the conversation?
Sure.
That's absolutely it. I think that when we go down that road, Jared, you said that not only is it true, but I think it's also good, right? Like God created music and all things are created good. So that's the premise we start from. And then humans can decide whether they continue to move that in good ways or move that in destructive ways, right? And so I think that there are those moments where, like, from a lyrical perspective or the way that it hits you emotionally, which is what the power of music is it touches us emotionally. That's why we sing in church, is because it activates the emotion within us that we have towards God, that we have to be mindful of what is that music doing and what is it crying out for and what is it calling in that space. And so, you know, if you are, in terms of that music space, if we're listening to a song that is objectifying women, that's probably something that Christians shouldn't pay attention to, you know? At the same time, if you're listening to a song that's, like James said, crying out for injustice or speaking about the beautiful day, going to U2, right?
Yeah.
Like there is some real truth in that we don't have to be ashamed as Christians to listen to. And then this weird thing has happened in music world where Christian music is like its own genre now, which I think is really dangerous because the Christian genre that's been created actually is separating itself from society and in culture and sounds different. Like the music that we listen to on K-Love or whatever sounds different than the secular music, which is only creating not a secular sacred divide, but it's creating an us versus them divide, you know, where we're no longer actually in tune with the culture in order to be able to speak, like James is saying, to their hearts, to their emotions in that.
It's interesting that you can hear a really good song and you think this is great, and then you read the lyrics and it like kills the song.
Yeah.
You know, have you ever had that experience where you're like, "Oh, this is awesome," and then you actually read it and you go, "Oh man, this song sucks. That's too bad."
And that's one of the dangers, I think, with music is a lot like I listened to AC/DC growing up, and I honestly didn't realize that 90% of their songs are about sex. Really. I mean, I was like, "Oh, you shook me all night long." That's what that's about.
Yeah.
And I knew all the words, but
Thought it was
I
a
never
dance party.
Serious. Yeah, I had no idea. But I think people are naive about the power of the lyrics.
Yeah.
Like I did this workshop at my old church where it was called Theology in Modern Music, and we'd bring people together and I'd pre-pick 2 songs. And we'd listen to it twice. I'd print the lyrics out, and then we'd have an open discussion, kind of a workshop, on what's this song about. So you remember a couple years back, Hozier had a song called "Take Me to Church," and naively you could be like, "Well, that sounds like a nice song." Well, if you listen to the song, what he's defining as church is a sexual relationship with his girlfriend that is so spiritually so. Sitting in a room with teenagers to like 70-year-old people, we dissected it. And they realized the power of the lyrics.
Yeah.
And even words that we put in there, you know, love can mean a lot of things. Yeah. And so for them to realize, or demons, back to that, like it's a beautiful song. And if you cut it off because it's not about Satan's little buddies.
Yeah.
It's about the human condition. But if people don't think and listen to the message and think critically, really is what it comes down to, I think.
Do you remember the band System of a Down?
Oh, yeah.
And they had the lyric, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." I remember listening to that in high school, and my friend and I were like, "I wonder if they're Christians."
They just said it really creepy.
Oh, man.
You know, this lyric conversation is even something we have when it comes to the music that we sing in church. Like there's there's a lot of conversations that wrap around lyrics and whether we should sing them. I mean, the latest is the Reckless Love song. And is God's love reckless? And we've had a lot of conversation around whether that's a song that Christians should sing and if that's theologically correct. The lyric that always gets plugged in moments like this is from Away in a Manger, where it says that Jesus doesn't cry, as a baby, and it's like, well, he probably did. Should we be singing that in church? And our Christian songs are littered with some theologically inaccurate statements that are made in them, and we've had conversations about some songs don't get sung. Yeah. Because it's actually speaking to something theologically.
Even though it's a really good song.
And at times a really popular song. And, where all of culture is singing that, but we've made the decision, just like we would in, quote unquote, secular music, going, this is probably not something that we would want to sing or like push on our people, because lyrically we're actually teaching them something that's not accurate, that's not good.
Yeah. So I have one more thought, or not thought, but we're going to go down. We're going here. I'm taking you here. So get ready.
Take us there.
Hang on tight. So there's a lot of conspiracy theories and things like this that can be wrapped around this, but I think that there's some validity there too. A long time ago, I watched a documentary, and it was called "I Sold My Soul to Rock and Roll," and it was talking about all of the actual demonic stuff that was behind different artists, like literally selling their souls to the devil for the sake of blowing up their music career. And we understand that Lucifer, who is Satan, who was cast down, we have biblical evidence that he was in charge of music. And so if that's something that he did, why would he not use it as a tool for evil instead of good, right? And so I'm just kind of curious when you think about some of that stuff, and they went into like Illuminati and all kinds of different things, but I'm just curious where you guys sit with the reality or not reality of, is it possible for someone to make a deal with the devil in order to make their career better? See? I told you we were going to go there.
Yeah.
So I think you can make a deal with the devil to make anything in life better.
Yeah.
Right? If we take scripture at its word that, Satan is the prince of this world, right? I mean, Genesis chapter 6 is probably the scariest moment in that space when, he turns us over to the evil. Later on, when Jesus is speaking, he says, go back to your father, who's Satan. Like, there's these moments in the space. And I think that anytime that advantage that's not holy and pure, right? The injustices that we sing about or speak about, all of those injustices of the world are people climbing on top of each other to get higher up in this space.
Yeah.
I don't think that music is any different in that world. I think that where I caution people is that we're all sinful human beings, and if the only songs that we listen to come from holy and pure people, we're probably not listening to a whole lot of songs. I mean, some of our most favorite songs are written by Martin Luther, right? Like, "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God." I mean, these are hymns that we've sang for decades. And Martin Luther, he wasn't that great of a guy when it came to the way that he treated women. And not that he was, a sexual deviant in that space, but he just wasn't very honoring of women the way that we're supposed to honor women. In fact, Martin Luther tore out James, the book of James in his Bible. Yeah, his Bible always tore out the book of James because he didn't believe that it was scriptural. And yet he's the one who's written these songs that still resonate with us today and that we hold up as good songs. And yet you go, well, like, there were some things in Martin Luther we wouldn't agree with today, right? And that we would even probably call sinful. And yet God still used him to bring about a message that's resonated in the world for hundreds of years.
Yeah, God is always using what was intended for evil for good. Any thoughts on that, James?
I think if people are seeking fortune and fame, the like Matt said, like, it doesn't matter what the platform is. But I mean, over the years, I mean, I have, like the White Album played backwards, or Jimmy Page.
That's the Beatles.
Yeah,
in case
like
you wanted to know.
and I mean, yeah, and
Hearing the secret messages.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And
What did it
and-
say when you played it backwards, James?
yeah.
Do you still have some of your vinyls? Because I've never actually
I don't.
participated in
A
the
backwards?
playing of records backwards. That
Yeah,
would
I
be like
don't-
an experience that
Do you
I
have
wanna
to do something special to your record player to make it play backwards?
Well,
Or you have to hold it
I
and do
would-
it manually?
I would do it manually.
Got
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't I've never subscribed to the idea of like certain people, kind of like the Ralph Macchio Crossroads, right? Like the whole the devil will give you all this fame and fortune. But I definitely think the power of influence, and I've felt that over the years, whether I created it or whether, like, I remember, my AC/DC, and like the first track is Hell's Bells, which is a beautiful song, right? But I was just like, listen with my older brother, like, yep, I'm going to hell now. and as a 13-year-old kid, like, well, it's a good song. And, but like getting Motley Crue Shout at the Devil, and just like, there's something about that relationship. But again, it's an industry. It's a business. And there's a lot of, Ozzy Osbourne and, the Prince of Darkness and Biting Off Bat Heads. It was a business. It was like it boosted sales, right? So
And it's a business that opens the door to a lot of the things that gratify the flesh, right? When you think of like, rock and roll, right? It's drugs and sex and all of that, which the pleasures of this world, so to speak, that for whatever reason, the music industry has opens the doors to that world for you in that space in ways. And so, whether the devil made me do it or not, like the reality is that temptation is there, and many people through the years have stepped right into that temptation through the industry of music.
Yeah.
Well,
through the
and
making of that craft.
Yeah.
And even in the Christian genre, I lived in Nashville for many years. I was a studio musician, and I would play gigs with guys on Saturday nights who would be sleeping with girls from the club and all these stuff, and then like, hey, let's meet at 3:00 tomorrow and write some gospel songs, because they knew all the Christian cliches and they knew how to put them together. But then there's other Christian artists, like a Hillsong does it. Early days of Christian music, like Michael Card and Rich Mullins and people like that, they would write their lyrics, and then they would actually send their lyrics to the elders of their church, and they would have godly people read them and make sure that they were theologically sound. And there's Christian music, even worship songs, right? That it's catchy and it has a great hook, but it's not biblical, and it's like, so I think,
Or it's just not good.
yeah. Well, yeah. And so for me, it's always been a caution both ways, because
Sure.
I don't want my kids or people at my church to be a cliche Christian. Like,
Yeah.
I want them to be a legit
Yeah.
Jesus in the world kind
Well,
of
we
person.
want to be genuine and authentic, right? And we
Yeah.
don't want to put on a facade, and we don't want to just play the part, but we want it to be something that's through and through. And so I think that as a follower of Jesus, I think that's how, I approach music, right? Is what is it driving me to? How is it affecting me spiritually and emotionally? Is it honoring to God, and is it not? And that's kind of has to be just like anything else, the way that we approach anything else that we do, we have to approach music that same way.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I don't have any other final thoughts. So
No, I think I'm out of thoughts.
yeah, okay, me too. I'm clean out. So it's so good. Thank you, James, for coming on and talking about this stuff with us. So good to have you
Good to be
with
here,
us.
guys.
We are doing all kinds of awesome stuff all the time at Crossroads. We're getting ready to start our new Luke series in a week. Is that this week?
Next weekend.
Next weekend, yep. And so make sure to check that out. Check out our other podcasts, and look forward to being with you guys